They wait. For big wave surfers, when winter is coming, it's about hyper preparation with Zen-like patience. For their careers and lives are held in sway by what the ocean will or will not deliver, somewhere in the northern hemisphere as winter descends. A half dozen or so of the best look forward towards this upcoming winter, each with their own quest, their own goals, their own fears, their own stories, with endings to be written in the maw of raving mountains of water. For Oahu's Makua Rothman, it would be about choices, when to go, where to go, if to go, all wrapped around a career-defining wave aptly named Jaws.
Missing those other swells was definitely doing my head in.
For Maui's Billy Kemper, the winter would be about a question. Could he come back from not just a career-threatening injury, but a life-threatening one? And it would call into question his mental abilities as well as physical ones.
This is my career. This is my livelihood. This is how I support and supply and provide for my family, is surfing. This is my job. This is what my mom raised me to be.
The hard-charging Keala Kennelly was seeking to find a balance between a bipolar diagnosis, a career as a DJ at a posh Waikiki nightclub, while claiming her place as a woman among men in the biggest and meanest waves on the planet.
I don't know if a lot of people know this about me, but I have bipolar type 2. And so I have like a lot of complicated emotions inside of me. So I just kind of save that up. I call it my dark rage. And you know, big wave surfing, like having that dark rage, like helps push me over the ledge. And so it's the best way it's part of my therapy, honestly.
For the always effervescent Kai Lenny, would the winter give him the stage to cement his position as the most progressive big wave surfer on Earth?
I just want to see my performance get better. The only way it's going to get better is if I just surf big waves consistently.
Will Shane Dorian, arguably the greatest big wave surfer of all time, go to new heights? Or have we seen the last of the great big wave gunslinger?
Things have just changed a little bit. I'm definitely feeling less pressure. I put a lot less pressure on myself.
Nathan Florence was seeking to find a balance between a reconnection with his father as a new husband and also to cement his place among the elite of the big wave world.
You are constantly putting your body on the line. It is a very, very selfish sport. For the close ones, especially in my instance, a new wife.
For up-and-coming Matt Bromley from South Africa, how far would he and could he travel in the age of COVID to challenge himself in the biggest, fiercest, meanest, and most unforgiving waves on Earth?
And then the thought of chasing a swell to Jaws in COVID, 2.5 days of travel ahead, surfing 50, 60-foot waves was just the most scary thought I could ever imagine.
For these surfers and a few others, the questions hung pregnant in the still air, waiting for the word from forecasters like Surfline's Kevin Wallace as to what fate had in store for them. And at the outset of the season, it wasn't looking good.
So I was not optimistic about a great big wave season this year, primarily because we had a moderate to strong La Nina setting up. And typically when we see La Nina conditions set up, which is the opposite of El Nino, meaning we've got cooler water along the tropical Eastern Pacific, we tend to see smaller surf than average. So to any big wave, prospective big wave surfer in the fall of 2020, I would say don't get your hopes up. But an incredible swell developed in the North Atlantic. That's where the surprise came in.
In late October, an unexpected development of extremely low barometric pressure off Greenland created a historic-sized storm, setting up a massive northwest groundswell aimed directly at Western Europe. Roaring south, the XXL swell would first show itself at Belhara, of France's picturesque Côte de Basque. The first one to catch one is Benjamin Sanchez. The same giant ground swells that lit up French reef breaks would translate to even bigger waves at Nazaré, Portugal. Converging on the traditional fishing village in droves, an international contingent of big wave surfers warmed up for the full brunt of the swell forecasted to fill in the following day.
You'll start to see what we call forerunners, meaning the very leading edge of these swells, and they'll start to fill in first. And you'll typically see kind of a somewhat of a gradual build, sometimes a very quick build, a peak in the swell, and then a decline in the swell. I think it's a possibility that there are waves, 100 feet or greater, especially overnight when that swell peaks.
Two surfers looking to make history on this historic day were Portugal's Nick van Rupp and Kai Lenny from Hawaii. For Kai, much of the challenge would just be traveling in the era of nations closing down.
Do I go, don't I go? It was the biggest single nightmare I've ever had traveling in my entire life. So I took a COVID test, then I wasn't sure that that COVID test would be good by the time I got to Europe. So I took another one. The next one came back positive, canceled my flights, everything. I told everyone I wasn't coming. I had a friend here pull some strings, and I got on the call with the head of the health department of all of Hawaii. And I told him my case, and he said, "You're good, just go." All of a sudden I show up to Portugal. I'm just like, I hope I don't get turned around. And they're like, "What are you doing here, like as an American?" And I'm like, "I'm going to Nazaré." And they're like, "Whoa, that's awesome." Stamped, and I went straight through.
For Kai, the day before the arrival of the brunt of the swell, the still manageable size meant it was a day for some fun.
I was afraid of falling asleep and having horrible jet lag. So it's like key for me to just go out in the water. And I'm like, what better way than just to warm up at Nazaré? Just get the feel of the water and, get in tune with my tow partner, Lucas Chumbo. Decided to bring the foil out and mess with the foil. The anticipation was crazy for that gigantic swell to come in. That next morning when we woke up, I'd never seen waves that big in my entire life. They had to be over 100 feet, 120 feet at least. Like that, I've never seen waves there break so far out. Made all days previous look like small.
Kai witnesses what appears to be the mythical 100-foot waves that have eluded big wave surfers for decades. But the swell begins dropping, and although the waves are still massive, the opportunity to catch one is gone.
Breaking on the Big Mama section, and the Big Mama was always this mythical part of the break that I had heard of. Those waves flare so much out that you could be what you think is on the shoulder going as fast as possible, and it kind of will give a little burst of energy. When the whitewater's that big, if it touches you, it just gobbles you up. Hadn't wiped out up to that point. Got a couple close calls with just the nature of the waves. And so it was like the first wipeout jitters were coming out. Instead of trying to do the traditional off the lip aerial, like I might try at Jaws, I'm gonna just hit these 8-foot chops going up the face and ride it like a snowboarder would. And that's where I've kind of started to integrate my 360s and flips and everything along the ride. And I'm just trying to ride it the way I can see fit best. And I just want to see my performance get better. The only way it's gonna get better is if I just surf big waves consistently. And, if I get pounded along the way, I've already gone through that emotional trauma of getting destroyed at every big wave many times over. It's just completely impossible to describe the experience of getting destroyed or even just riding a big wave. I mean, it's like trying to describe a color to somebody. Unless you've seen it for yourself, you just don't really know what you're talking about. The GoPro, in a way, gave me a certain level of hope as I was getting detonated by 50 to 60 foot waves. I just figured, you know, record everything and show the true experience. Every time I'd get pounded, I would hold the GoPro so tight to my chest, and I was just like, don't lose it, because I just got the craziest shot of the wave before. And all the screws on the pole were loosening, and I could feel it wiggling. And I was just like holding the pieces together. I'm like, don't lose the camera, I'll be so devastated. And when I got on the jet ski, I was just so stoked that I kept the camera. That's what I was celebrating. In the video, you can see I'm so psyched. And it wasn't because I was getting picked up, because at that point, I was pretty much on the beach. I was just like, thank goodness I got the camera.
There's always been a stigma against surfers coming out of Europe, and Nick has big plans for the day to make his mark on the world stage. But things go wrong at the outset. He catches a bomb, but instead of an epic ride, the fierce competition for waves leads to the kind of encounter you do not want to have on a giant day.
I got snaked by Jet Resgat team, you know, going down a wave and feeling a surfboard on your leg, just like da, 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 da. I wasn't sure if it was a surfboard or if it was a jet ski, you know,
Oh
like
my
it was
God,
such a scary situation. It took me a couple hours to come back from that. All of a sudden the lineup cleared up, there was no one in the water.
Nick takes advantage of the incredible conditions, hoping to capture imagery that will propel his career forward. With the empty lineup and still very powerful surf rolling in, Kai joins in the fun. They both put on a show for the famous Nazare crowd on the cliffs. Big waves, prime conditions, electrifying performances. The action this day at Nazare was nothing short of historic. Following this swell, the North Atlantic takes a breather. And for a moment, it seems that maybe the foreboding forecast of a slow winter is coming true. Until the North Pacific suddenly goes purple blob, the computer visualization of a megastorm meaning one thing: mega waves. It is a storm that is heading into the perfect swell window for Hawaii's most fearsome big wave break, Piahi, commonly known as Jaws, on Maui.
It was kind of right in that size where it wasn't so big that, you know, people wanted to tow. It was still one of those paddle swells, definitely on the verge of being a tow swell. And the wind stayed just light enough for guys and gals to want to paddle it too.
For South Africa's Matt Bromley, looking to establish himself among the elite of big wave surfers, he was determined to get to Jaws no matter the cost or what was involved. As a professional big wave surfer, Matt's ability to feed his family relies on getting media coverage in big waves. The stakes seemed like they couldn't get higher until he received news from his wife.
So I was sitting in my little flat in Cape Town, Muizenberg, and I saw the Surfline chart like way off, like 15 days in advance. I saw there was a big system coming to Jaws. And whenever I see those systems, my stomach just starts churning. So the tension was already high, and then we had just found out a few days before that Jade was pregnant, and she was going for her first scan on the Wednesday, and that was the day that the swell was hitting Jaws, and I was just like, where are my priorities? Is it selfish for me to now leave her and go chase a swell to Hawaii? And the other side of it, I haven't traveled for 10 months, so I really need this, and I really need to go do this. And it was just a roller coaster of emotions.
Cape Town to Cairo, Cairo to Bangkok, Bangkok to London, London to New York, New York to LA, LA to Maui, and finally to a tattered tent in a muddy field on a cliff overlooking Piahi, where the swell boomed like thunder throughout the night.
I could hear the waves were massive, and I wasn't getting any sleep. It's like 5 in the morning, and I started getting in my routine to get ready for the surf, and I called her, and then she just sent through the scan, and it was like this tiny little pulse like beating, and I just started crying. I was just so overwhelmed with emotion. My strategy was to try sit furthest out the back and wait for that one really big one. So like quality over quantity. Paddling out, I thought I better get shake off all the cobwebs and the jet lag, so I caught a wider insider, and it just felt totally awkward. My feet were pretty much together, my legs were straight, I almost fell off, and I caught that wave, and I managed to make it to the channel. I was like, oh my gosh, I can't do that again. And one of the guys, I think it might have been Nathan Florence, he paddled past, he's like, oh, luckily you got that one out the way, because it was just a wobbly, terrible stanced wave. And then I went and sat like beyond everyone, like furthest out the back. Now's the time to like really get the biggest wave of your life. So sitting out there, and then a really big set came in, and everyone was paddling up over it. And I felt like I was in a good spot, and something just told me like, go. I thought to myself, if I make this wave, it's gonna be the best wave of my life. Really windy and wild, and I put my head down, I was like, I'm going no matter what. And I airdropped, the wind got under my board, I airdropped sideways. I connected back with the face, but my front foot landed on the side of the stringer. So my foot landed right on the rail, and the board started doing a cutback, like back into the critical part of the wave. And I looked up, and this 40 foot above me, the lip was starting to fall, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is about to get really, really bad. The wave exploded on the back of my board. I pulled all my limbs in because I knew the impact was going to be really harsh. So I pulled everything in, and the wave hit me so hard, like so hard.
While Bromley experiences the harsh consequences of Jaws, emerging big wave star Nathan Florence is looking for his first wave.
We hadn't put our big padded suits on with our full vest in 8 months again, and those things are restricting. So we're like, okay, like this is it. The first Jaws swell of the season isn't a regular swell. It isn't a nice warm-up swell. It was literally 25 to 30 foot. I had a goal that session of, obviously the goal on all those is to get the wave of your life. And I think I had the wave, and it had this huge boil in it, kind of airdropped over it, pulled up, and looked up and said, oh my God, this is it, the wave I've always dreamed about. It just warbled on another step, and the lip landed directly on my head. I exploded into oblivion, and I had 2 huge wipeouts. I had 1 successful ride that day, but I remember that session fondly. You learn a lot from failure as well.
While Florence and Bromley experienced a challenging session at Jaws, Kai Lenny has a mysterious psychological advantage from his previous session at Nazaré.
When I got back and there was a Jaws swell on the forecast, I was really excited because I'm like, there's no way in heck if we're paddling it's going to be nearly as big as Nazaré. So now psychologically, I have this crazy advantage that whatever wave I see come in is going to look small, even though it's going to be huge. Because if you feel like the waves aren't going to be that big, all of a sudden they become more playful and can kind of just do what you want to do without fear of consequence.
Kai, who grew up just down the road, casually rides in the eye of the wave with steeds. One wave in particular shows off his intimate relationship with the break.
If I come out straight, there's a chance that the fang of the lip is gonna kind of nail me. So I'm gonna come out at the bottom. And in my head, I'm not even thinking about just coming out and kicking out. I'm like, if I come out low at the bottom of this barrel and just miss the lip, I can get enough time to do a big turn before the wave's over. And I'm just like, I gotta hit it.
It doesn't matter who you are or how much of a psychological advantage you think you have. The powerful waves at Jaws will extract the tax for everyone who surfs it. Brutal wipeouts are an accepted part of the big wave game, but they bring about an unusual reaction from the surfers.
I don't know, there's a thing called nervous laughter. So, you kind of laugh at the most horrifying situations, and I think it's a defense mechanism to try to cope with the intensity of such a situation.
But it's kind of more of a maniacal laugh, like, we survived! Like,
I mean, what am I gonna do, cry? Might as well laugh. Oh, jeez, that's horrible. That's horrible. That's horrible.
Yeah, wipeouts are always really funny in retrospect and after the fact. They're not funny at all while they're happening. They're like terrifying and painful. And but yeah, for some reason, when you go through something that intense and survive it and come out like unscathed, it makes you feel stronger knowing that like you got through that situation. So I don't know, it makes us chuckle. And we love watching other people wipe out. As long as we know like they survived and they were okay and they didn't get hurt, like it's freaking funny.
Sometimes a wipeout may not look that terrible from the outside perspective, but for the surfer in the wrong place at the wrong time, the consequences can be enormous.
Yeah, I was down in northern Africa in Morocco chasing some heavy waves. Probably best trip of my life. When you watch all the footage that day, that wave stood out so much different than any other wave that came in. The way it hit the sandbank and how much water it drew off, like we all knew. Like everyone who's seen that wave was like, well, that wave was, there's something different about that wave. There's so much water pulling off the sand. My outside rail caught and I just face planted and up and over straight into a rock. As soon as I hit, it knocked me out unconscious. I was out, like gone. The first person grabbed me is when I felt like the pain kind of kick in. Just, you couldn't tolerate. Like, I don't care who you are, how strong you are. You put somebody in that environment, at that place and time, and you're just fighting to survive. Collapsed my right lung, broke my pelvis, contused my quad muscle, and just destroyed my knee. I was in the hospital in Morocco for a couple days before I was brought back to the US. I wasn't in a condition that you could fly on a commercial plane, so it was a private medevac medical plane, completely equipped with everything. And alongside of that, my lungs weren't stable enough to take long hauls, so we were stopping every 3 to 5 hours. Coming into LA was a whole nother story. This is right around February 24th. 2020, COVID's hitting like no tomorrow. They actually denied us at LAX, denied us at San Bernardino, denied us at Long Beach, and then Van Nuys opened up and gave us a green light to where we landed, and I was taken straight into the hospital and put into trauma surgery on my pelvis. Literally, when I woke up out of that surgery, like, it just felt like I was born again. This pain was all of a sudden just gone. This injury was much more than just, putting me coming back to surfing at risk. Without returning, there goes my career. Who I am is a professional surfer. I work in the ocean. The ocean is my office, and it's how I pay my bills. It's how I bought my house. It's how I provide for my family. Will I be able to return to the waves I want to surf? Can I surf waves like I used to surf big waves? You know, that put a lot on my table as far as focusing on the 2021 winter. It was so much more than just like trying to be healthy and fit for some big waves and a good season at Jaws. Like, it was like, I'm coming back from a life-threatening injury and also trying to be ready to surf Jaws on any swell that it breaks this year.
After 9 months of grueling rehab, Billy's body is back in shape. But a question remains. Will his mind allow him to overcome the fear and allow him to surf as he did before his injury?
And this is like a make or break moment for Billy, because those questions go through your head. Do I still have what it takes? Will my body perform the same way as it did before that bad injury? It's a complete question mark.
You could tell Billy was nervous, but he was also finding his feet again, because he was like, can I do this?
There was so much on my mind with how my body's gonna react, how my mind's gonna react, and at the end of the day, you know, going to sleep that previous night, I told myself that I wanted to go out to Jaws and I wanted to surf the way I normally surf. You know, I don't want to think about my injuries. I don't want to think about what I've done to get here. I just want to go out there and be present, live in the moment, and just surf my backyard the way I surf it. I was able to do that, and it was honestly probably the most proud and successful feeling moment of my entire life.
As Billy drops into a monster, the answer to the questions become clear. He's back and gets the wave of the day. While the session at Jaws on Maui continues all afternoon, Makua decides to stay on the north shore of Oahu because he thinks the swell will be perfect for the outer reefs. Making the call to stay on the north shore is not entirely surprising. After all, it's where Makua grew up and is still the epicenter of surfing. He's a small town boy and a local prince at a unique stretch of coastline.
They call this stretch of road the 7 Mile Miracle. It just looks like an average country road, you know, houses from the 70s and 50s and stuff. And this is where some of the best surfing in the world happens. This is where you prove if you're a real professional surfer or not, is in Hawaii. The Super Bowl of surfing is right behind these trees. I mean, you'd never tell. It's almost like Yankee Stadium. It's just on the other side of these trees, but no one really knows, you know, until you get out there and you look at how beautiful it is and you actually get to see for yourself. This is the birthplace of surfing. My ancestors created the sport, so there's only right that the best surfing in the world goes down here. It's just a beach town on the island of Oahu, and it's my home. It's who I am, it's where I'm from. I was raised here. We lived in a tent on the beach. My dad was in jail. I mean, I lived in a spray paint room, on a surfboard shaping shop.
Makua has gone through a lot of adversity, and it makes for great character. You know, when you have nothing and you're on the beach and perhaps you're borrowing that tent you're sitting in, and adversity has taught Makua to bring out the best in him.
I'd never been able to breathe good. You know, still to today when I surfed, I still had a hard time when I first paddled out.
You know, like I'd take him one heat to go surf a contest when he was like under 10 years old, you know, and I'd have to take him to the dispensary after for asthma treatment, you know.
I remember a few times going to the hospital and wondering if I was gonna still be alive, you know, in a little while. I remember like thinking those might be my last gasps of air. I took 7 different medicines 4 times a day just to keep me alive.
We kept at it, soccer, football, everything. Every sport there was, he played. He made the all-star soccer team from this whole side of the island and had asthma.
I overcame it, and surfing saved my life. Being held under the water and making myself hold my breath when I didn't have air and working it. If not, I probably wouldn't be around. You know what really fuels my fire? What really fuels me to do what I do today is to be able to be a champion, and be a champion for a nation, be a champion for a whole group of people. You know, when I win for Hawaii. When I surf for Hawaii. A lot of my drive comes from my culture, comes from being proud of being who I am and where I'm from, and our culture being so suppressed once upon a time, and being able to say, I'm proud to be Hawaiian.
Joining Makua on the North Shore is Shane Dorian. It's a decision that seems out of character for the big wave legend, but actually marks a pivotal moment in a storied career.
Shane Dorian, in his prime, was the only guy out there literally breathing fire and wanting those big black waves that nobody else wanted.
Oh my gosh, Shane Dorian just got the biggest barrel ever paddling, hands down.
Dorian is one of the most gifted surfers in the world, ever.
Along with his big wave accolades and redefining the limits of the sport, an incident where things went perilously wrong at a break in Northern California led to Shane making an extraordinary contribution to the safety of riding enormous mountains of water and allowing the performances now taking place to be possible and safe.
2010, I had been sort of successfully avoiding surfing Mavericks for a long time. Something about Mavericks just not super inviting. Fog and the gray and the dark water and the great white sharks. Everyone I talked to who had surfed there just said the place was very scary and very dangerous, super easy to drown. Something about the way the bottom is there, the bathymetry of the reef does like this waterfall thing where the water pushes over the reef and it hits a deep spot and all the water holds you down. So you get dragged along the reef and stuck. There had been a couple people that have died there, and that's always in the back of my head. I went there for my first time for this swell at Mavericks.
It's the crack of dawn. We meet up in the harbor at Half Moon Bay. You can hear this thunderous wave breaking. It's literally a mile outside the harbor.
It's kind of a long ride, like maybe like a 10 or 15 minute jet ski ride out there. And I remember telling myself that no matter what wave comes in, I'm gonna go on it. I don't care how big it is. If I'm in the right spot, I'm going. And I'll have a visual picture in my mind of sort of what that wave looks like, what it feels like, what it sounds like. And so when that wave appears, you're ready. You've already seen that wave. All of a sudden this set came in and all the boats started whistling and screaming and the boat started motoring out a little bit and this massive set was coming and I was like, this is it. This is the wave, you know, this is the wave I want. It was just this big, giant, black beast of a wave.
That was a 60-foot wave.
I remember getting to my feet and just locking in and feeling so good. And I remember just thinking this wave is probably the biggest. In my mind, I was like, this is the biggest wave ever ridden at Mavericks. It's so big. Like the whole ocean was sucking up on the reef. And I was like, I got this. And then I was like halfway down the face and I just saw this huge bump coming up. As soon as I went over it, it was like a Cadillac going over a speed bump going super fast. And I hit it and thought I had it, and all of a sudden just had this residual bump afterwards that I couldn't control. When you go that fast and the water's moving that quick in the opposite direction, I basically just skipped like I was on the asphalt, you know? And I skipped down the face and stopped, and then I started getting sucked up the face, and I actually swam to the very top as I was getting sucked over, because I knew I was going over anyway. And I got a huge breath, I was going over. I remember getting pulled down so fast that I was clearing my ears when I hit the bottom.
I'm watching his 10-foot board go down, down, down. It's tombstoning. And that tombstoning factor means he's either slamming the bottom or he's trying to climb up his leash because he's going through hell down there.
I have no flotation of any type. I'm just down here. And nothing I'm doing is helping me. I felt like I just kind of bounced and like kind of was getting pulled underwater and kind of stuck in one spot. And then I was under and under and under. It wouldn't let me up, it wouldn't let me up, it wouldn't stop. And so finally I started freaking out. I started kind of panicking and trying to swim to the surface and swimming as hard as I could and going so slow that I was thinking, if there's another wave, it's gonna break right about now.
And this wave literally lands right on top of his tombstoning board. What that means is he's been down the whole time. He hasn't got a breath.
I remember just thinking my chances of living through this just went from like really, really good to really, really scary. I remember just being at like the bottom of the Pacific Ocean in Northern California, just going, what the hell am I down here? Why am I here? I remember having like a weird visual of my son. I remember he was smiling and his hair was blowing in the wind. And when you feel like you're in a really perilous situation and you all of a sudden becomes really clear what's important, you know?
No doubt in my mind, he has ceased to be, and at least we'll be able to find his body and return it so his family has some kind of closure.
It was like the walls were closing in, and if they got closed before I got a breath, that was it, you know? Like that involuntary, at this point it was like, I remember just struggling and kicking and screaming and just trying to get to the surface. And I remember breaking the surface and like getting basically half air, half water in. I remember Frank Chiarte coming to get me on the ski. I felt like physically, mentally, and emotionally completely drained 100%. I remember going back to the boat and just being so grateful that I survived that situation.
His lips are blue, his eyelids are blue because of the oxygen deprivation. He's literally shaking, and after 10 minutes he starts saying, "My son, I'm so selfish," just little broken tidbits.
I remember thinking I should probably call my wife and tell her I'm okay.
He just called me and he said he had a bad wipeout. And I really didn't know until much later what really happened.
I remember thinking something's off about her. And I don't know, I just all these weird emotions happening. And as soon as I hung up the phone, I realized it's her birthday.
He missed my birthday and Valentine's Day to surf big waves, but that's very typical.
That really put things in perspective again, for sure. I love big waves, but nothing compared to my family, you know? And I had to come up with something where I could justify surfing big waves and make it safer. Something where I felt like I was gonna come home to my family for sure. I remember getting on my plane and them going through the safety demonstration, make sure your tray tables are up. If the shit hits the fan, this life vest will come down and you put it on and pff. And I remember the lady was like standing like 10 feet away from me and she's like, yeah, just in a gnarly situation, you just go pff. And I just went, what? And then I immediately like got my backpack out and got my pencil and my paper and like started drawing like what I thought would be a good idea for a big wave surf suit that would inflate, like an inflatable wetsuit. I called my buddy that worked at Billabong in the wetsuit department, and I sent him my sketches and told him my idea, and I got on a phone call with him and said, here's what I want to do. He was like, I think we can do it. About a month later, I had a prototype. If I hadn't thought of that, I definitely wouldn't have accomplished what I've accomplished in big waves. You do a lot of cool stuff as an athlete. Every now and then you get some glory, but nothing you do is important, you know? There's nothing you do that is important, really, as an athlete. Not on the field, not in the ocean. But when you have an impact on something that's life-saving, that's important. And so from a legacy perspective, I look back on that and go, that's something that I'm really proud of, you know?
Patrick Shane Dorian's name will always be synonymous with big wave surfing. He has cemented himself right up in there. He's got a star in the Surfing Hall of Fame. Come on. I mean, it's Dorian. What are you going to say?
Shane Dorian has done so much in his life. He's one of the highlight big wave surfers of all time now. How does any great sports figure know when it's time to slow down? At some point you go, you know what? I don't feel it like I used to feel it. Shane revealed to me in December that he's kind of had enough of it. Enough of the hustle, enough of the stress, enough of trying to get to the next place in time. Be there for that, be here for that. I think he's really starting to miss his family.
You get to a point surfing big waves where you achieve everything you think you can. You might have 5 or 10 years to accomplish what you really want. And I'm kind of on the other side of that now, where I feel really good about the 10 years I spent really focusing on surfing Jaws. I put 100% of my effort into it, and now I'm really excited to sometimes sit on the sidelines and watch guys like Billy and Ian and Kai and Nathan Florence and Makua and all these younger guys coming up that are in the zone in that right time in their life. And that's what makes it exciting, is the next generation. I have a lot of happiness in my life. I have an amazing wife and kids that are growing up, and those are the things that I'm really focused on now, and going on surf trips with my kids. That's what I'm all about these days.
The legend himself, Shane Dorian. Okay, this is the guy right here.
Letting me borrow all his boards today. The ability and the energy and the fitness and the mental capacity and mindset you need to paddle surf Jaws is like a 10 out of a 10. Where that same size wave to tow surf, not at Jaws, maybe is like a 5 out of 10. So tow surfing a little mellower waves on the North Shore is a very low stress type of situation. I can have a good time, surf a million waves.
Got there and the waves were cracking. It was massive. Looking in the morning, it was closing out in front of my house. So launched the skis, we get in the water, we get out there, it was kind of like, okay, where'd those waves go? A couple came in, we're like, oh, okay, there's a couple sets. We pulled me into a few waves, and I was like, this doesn't feel like what it's supposed to feel like. Oh, I was sitting there at Shane on, he was looking at me, and I was looking at him, and I pretty much knew exactly what he was thinking. But we had fun, got a couple waves. Yeah, sometimes you expect things to happen, and you're dealing with Mother Nature, and she does not always play by the numbers on a screen. I was thinking I should have been at Jaws.
Keala Kennelly, who also decides to stay on the North Shore of Oahu, is hoping to score waves on the outer reefs as well.
I sometimes ask myself why I do this. Because it's incredibly dangerous, and there's not a lot of money in it. I love pushing my limits. I love challenging myself, and riding big waves is just such a rush. There's such an adrenaline rush. You know, I haven't felt anything like that in any other sport, in any other thing I do in this life. I don't know if a lot of people know this about me, but I have bipolar type 2. And so I have like a lot of complicated emotions inside of me, and I internalize a lot of those, and so I kind of like store those up, you know, and I find like eventually like it's gonna burst out of me and I'm gonna have to release that somehow. And you know, some people have bipolar rage and release that onto other people, and I just would never want to put that on anybody. So I just kind of save that up. I call it my dark rage, and you know, big wave surfing, like having that dark rage, like helps push me over the ledge, and so it's the best way it's part of my therapy, honestly. So when that first swell popped up, usually my first inclination is to fly over and surf Jaws, because that is kind of like the Coliseum of big wave surfing. It's probably the best big wave spot on the planet. And then I saw what the wind forecast was going to be like, and then it was going to be much cleaner on Oahu. I decided to stay and surf the outer reefs. Once I took Jaws off the table, there were 3 options on Oahu. I could have gone and towed an outer reef. I could have gone and surfed Waimea. A lot of the other women, big wave surfers, pretty much all of them were there. And then there was the 3rd outer reef for paddling. Yeah, so when you go paddle surf like one of the outer reefs, you know, you show up first thing in the morning, you know, it's still, the sun hasn't completely popped yet, so it's still kind of kind of dark and ominous, and you're looking out, and it's so far out there, it's really hard to gauge like what you're about to get yourself into. You know, I sat there that morning and watched a couple waves just close out the entire channel, and you know, it's a really long paddle, so at least you have that time as you're paddling out to just kind of psych yourself up and assess the conditions. But yeah, you really just don't know what you're getting yourself into until you get out there. It takes a good 15 to 20 minutes. And paddling on a big board, which goes pretty fast, you know. I never base my choice of where I'm going based on like what the other women are doing. You know, from the start of my big wave career, it was usually me and nothing but guys. So I usually try and follow the guys and, you know, see where they're going. And I'm always trying to like push my limits, you know, and every time go bigger, go harder, go deeper. I think that the men used to be very unwelcoming when I first started because I was the only female. I kind of had this attitude of like, you don't belong out here and you should go back to the beach and, you know, you can't do this. And I think after so many years of proving that I do deserve to be out there, and then other women coming up and performing well like Paige and Andrea and Bianca, I think now the attitude has completely changed and they're much more welcoming of the females in the water.
Kiala's an animal. We call her an Annie. She is just, she makes the guys nervous. Cause she might not have caught the biggest wave, but I'll tell you what, she'll charge harder than 90% of those guys out there. She's like the Wonder Woman for surfing, you know, she's crazy.
You know, when you're able to have that fear that big wave surfing and putting yourself in those situations gives you, and then being able to stand up to it and conquer it and then get an incredible ride, the overcoming the fear is, I think, what I'm addicted to, even more than the rush of the ride. It's like, that is such an empowering feeling when you can stand up to your fear and conquer it.
Back on Maui, monster waves continue to break. For most surfers, a ferocious wipeout like Matt Bromley had would send you to the shore. But Matt's traveled too far and too much is on the line, and he heads back out to catch a big one.
I was the only person kind of in position for it, and I just put my head down. I just said, I'm going, no matter what. The wave lifted me up beautifully, and I got this epic kind of chip shot into it, and I went down this beautiful big steep wall. I ramped over the foam section at the end and exploded and then shot out the end, and I was like, oh my gosh, like that just made the whole trip like so worth it. And
typically what happens is Hawaii will see a swell, see that swell, and then about 2 days later you'll see it in Northern California.
Matt's original plan was to hop on a plane and head home as quickly as he could after the swell to rejoin his newly pregnant wife. But this same swell now has a new destination, Mavericks in Northern California, and he's not going to miss it. Already jet lagged, Bromley takes the red eye to Northern California and joins the locals and surfers like Kai, who has also made the trek. They're hoping for a special day at a special location. Neither Matt Bromley or Kai Lenny are disappointed at what they encounter at Mavericks.
I went and sat way out the back, and about 45 minutes later, this beautiful big bomb came in. Probably one of the best waves of my life, just straight off the bat.
On a good day, the crowds fill in, belying the fact that Mavericks is the deadliest big wave break on the planet.
So yeah, Mark Fu died there many years ago, and then Cyan Milosky more recently. And just knowing that people have died out there is such a gnarly thing.
On an all-time day like this, the competition for waves is fierce, as surfers vie for a career making wave, which pushes them to take chances they would normally avoid. Just ask Matt Bromley, who following a great opening ride, finds himself getting an all-time flogging in the cold, deadly Northern California waters. Flawless conditions, unmatched performances, crazy wipeouts, an all-time day at Mavericks. For our cast of big wave surfers, it had already been an incredible season, but the wave gods had one last surprise in store and saved the best and biggest for last, and offering another chance at career-making glory.
Yeah, so this next swell popped up for mid-January, and it looked bigger than the one earlier than the season. It looked bigger than anything we'd seen in probably at least a couple years. So we just, we got excited again. Conditions on Oahu that day, as good as it gets. Swell of that size, for those winds to accompany it is really very rare.
Graced by ideal conditions, the outer reefs on the North Shore became a perfect canvas for Nathan's brother and three-time world champion, John Florence, to show off his performance skills in larger surf. Veteran surf photographer Mike Latronic sat on the back of a jet ski, documenting the amazing session. He thinks he's seen it all, but he's in for a surprise.
It doesn't get more beautiful on the outer reefs than this day. Like a Bali wind or a Tahiti wind, but it was 20 to 25 feet. Literally 15 to 20 skis in the water, which is kind of a circus show. My buddy's driving for me. We're getting killer shots. John, Florence, and Kelly Slater's out.
Although the session seems like a fantasy, when it comes to big wave surfing, dreamy days can take a dark turn quickly, and usually when it's least expected.
I knew the tide was dropping. I knew the swell was coming up, but I was so lulled to sleep of the beauty and pristineness of this ocean. It was like, it's too beautiful to hurt us. Next thing you know, it's like we're moving, even just a 5 mile an hour move, I have to hold on. And I've got one arm wrapped around my driver, and I looked out of this corner of my eye and I'm like, ooh, that looked a little different. I could sense all the other ski, like everybody was moving, and I'm like, ooh, this is not good. We're right at the bottom of this, I don't know, 15, 18 foot wave. First, my guy was trying to see if we could just creep up with, but there was no creeping, man. We were gonna have to turn around or go up it going too slow. So he went to bust through the lip. Time kind of did stop. I swear I must have been 30, 40 feet in the air. But there was a guy next to us that probably went 70, 80 feet in the air. I land in the water with my camera. Everything's good. I got my float suit on. I'm like, I come up, there's like a melee everywhere. All of a sudden it's like, some guys didn't really make it. Debris, it's a yard sale, but in surfing. That jettison, I'll never forget that. Like, that is imprinted in my brain forever.
What appears to have happened is there was a lot of inexperienced people out there at the same time. And even the ones who might have been experienced got boxed in, and they weren't able to turn around and go in. You never want to face a 60-foot wave on a jet ski. I don't care if it's on a boat or a surfboard, The point is to turn around and either ride it or get out of its way. So, some people look like they might have actually just got boxed in and had no choice but to go over. You talk about, if you were to make a comparison to the jet ski going over the wave and somebody on a motocross going over a jump. When you jump on a motocross, you're looking for a soft landing, and then trying to find an angle to come down on. When you go on a wave,
the angle is just swept by. So you're gonna land in the flats. That's what happened. You know, somebody ended up getting a ride home in an ambulance. You know, those injuries that became of that incident didn't have to happen. That's all I can say.
While the North Shore is graced with rare light winds, Jaws conditions are howling winds, what the locals ironically call Maui glass.
Jaws was windy. It was doable, but it was too big and it was too windy for anybody to paddle. So it was a big tow session day.
For Nathan Florence, the Swell provides another opportunity to find his dream wave. While he didn't reach his goal at the last session, outside of his surfing career, he was able to achieve some of his own personal goals.
Normally every summer, I travel all summer long. This summer, I didn't leave the island once. It was nice and it worked out perfectly because finally got that time to spend with my girlfriend at the time, which turned into a proposal. With that happening, I was able to fly my dad out. He's been in Florida for 6 or 7 years. One goal he said was, I want to get spit out of a barrel by the time I leave, and he was only here for a week, and I was like, it's not gonna happen, but we'll get you up on some waves. So it was just good quality time. I got married, and I got to spend a lot of time with family. I saved money, and I was able to go in on my first home. So on that side of things, outside of surfing, it was probably one of the better years of my life. And then winter hit, and we had one of the better winters. So it's been a pretty good year. First or second wave, I ended up getting to the bottom and looking up, and there was just the look up, like I'm talking craning my neck to look all the way up at this lip line, which is like, looked like it was 50 feet away. And the wave ended up curling and throwing over me, and I was in this huge barrel for a second, and I was like, all right, that's it, like my day is done. I got out and made it, and then I had gone and done what I wanted to do. I rode the biggest waves I've ever ridden that day on a board at all, and I went the fastest I've ever gone. So I kind of just sat back on the boat and enjoyed the show after that.
For Kiala Kennelly, after a successful outer reef session on the previous Swell, she decides to challenge herself at Jaws. But the bumpy, windy conditions put her at a physical disadvantage due to her slight frame.
You know, it was really challenging. The wind was just nuking. Andrea whipped me into a couple, the chops hitting your board. I mean, I felt like I was dropping down an escalator, dropping down a flight of stairs every time I took a wave, and you know, was just hanging in there for dear life, trying not to go flying. My best big wave friends, Bianca, Paige, and Drea, they have a nickname for me. They call me Kiala Sendley instead of Kiala Kennelly. So I'm always out there trying to send it and live up to that nickname. So I feel like I did that this winter.
Joining Kiala on this day is Frances Justine DuPont. She gets whipped deep into the throat of a monster. She stalls and allows herself to be positioned into a death-defying barrel. She comes out unscathed. The ride is later called by Sam George, former editor of Surfer magazine, the greatest ever by a female rider.
That wave that Justine got, I mean, that was the wave of a lifetime ride, whether you're a man or a woman. I mean, that was just an incredible, incredible ride.
For Kai Lenny, who wants to dominate his home break, his session starts off rough as he loses his board, something he's very particular about when it gets pushed into the rocky shore break.
I just recently heard that there was a rumor that I always chase after my board because I don't want anybody to see what's going on, and it's probably true. It really was like, if I had to encapsulate the most dramatic day in my big wave surfing career, was probably that one, from the lows to the highs. The start of the session was really frustrating. You had people who probably shouldn't have been out there, all wanting the best big wave. People give you zero respect, and people need to be put on notice. And then have that escalate to all of a sudden losing a jet ski on the rocks. And I just remember going, this is just a test. This is just a jet ski. Got a bunch of guys. We lifted the jet ski, hit it in a tree, swam back out. It was towards the end of the day. I hadn't even gotten a really good wave yet. And my brother rose to the occasion and he was like, I'm gonna tell you into the best waves of your life right now. And I was just like, let's do this.
Makua is no stranger to Jaws. In fact, it was the wave that put him on the map 20 years ago.
Yeah, I caught the world's biggest wave at the youngest age. 66-foot wave at Jaws. Changed my life forever. It was the boy who rode the biggest wave. Wave heard around the world. All these things.
For Makua Rothman, this amazing and surprising surf season has been something of a bust, as he's made the wrong choices and been in the wrong place at the wrong time. But now he's not about to let this opportunity go by. Riding big waves may be his passion, but it's also his job. And so far this year, he's not been getting it done.
So November comes, Nazare, we don't go. We're fine with that, right? You know, swells are coming. December comes, a swell comes to Hawaii. What do? Do I go to Jaws? Do I stay home? I just gotta say I got lazy. I just wanted to stay home. I didn't want to travel through COVID and drag my stuff and yada, 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 yada. Missing those other swells was definitely doing my head in. Well, I'll tell you what, the next swell that came, I did not miss Jaws. That's for darn sure. There's no chance I was missing another swell after that.
Billy Kemper has already proven he's back. So this day, he takes the helm of the jet ski to help his friend Makua score on this massive day. For Makua, after a season of missing the best swells, this is his chance to remind everyone he's still a king among the big wave elite. And he turns a season of frustration into a historic ride. He'll never claim it, but in a world where it's impossible to accurately measure the size of a wave, some say this one is 100 feet. It's almost certainly among the biggest ever ridden at Piahi.
Like if you see in parts of my wave, like there's a trail that goes up behind me and some parts of it are broken because I had to jump off like an edge, like a cliff. I thought it was going to be more down the line, so it's a little bit ahead of where I wanted to be. And even till this day when I watch the video, I'm like, I could have been more deep. But just like anybody that does something professionally, they always critique themselves and want to do it a little different next time.
Makua's ride was historic, a fitting coda to one of the most spectacular big wave seasons ever. Matt Bromley proved he belongs among the elite, riding rolling monsters, blocking out epic wipeouts, and now back at home with his wife, about to have a baby boy. Billy Kemper overcame a life-threatening injury and re-established his career as an elite big wave rider, despite horrific odds. Keala Kennelly proved once again she charges as hard as anyone, funneling her bipolar torment into ecstasy wherever the waves break biggest. Kai Lenny overcame the odds to surf every swell the season spat out, setting a new bar by reimagining what's possible on a big wave. Nathan Florence rode the best waves of his career and found balance in his personal life. Shane Dorian made a pivotal decision in his big wave career, choosing to focus on his family while watching the next generation take the reins. For Makua Rothman, missing the early season swells fired him up to end the season with a historic ride at the fabled Jaws, cementing his position in the sport of kings. Whether it's giant bombs or rippable small ones, ultimately the waves are just a canvas where human stories are written.